Draft day is a game of chance, but what the Calgary Flames do or don't do could redefine their future down the middle.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Locked On Flames. I am Ryan G. Coming up, we explore what we learned this week, and we're also going to take a look at trading up in the upcoming NHL draft. What is that worth if Calgary were to move from number 30 on Friday night? And while I want to tell you more about how it should go in the draft, the biggest part of today's show is going to be thinking about how the long-term future is impacted by the draft, because the reality is the draft is on Friday night. This episode comes out on Friday, and we'll actually know by the time many of you listen to this exactly what the Calgary Flames have chosen to do. And so I think it's important to explore what they should do and also what they're likely to do, more of the reasons that they won't do something, and we'll go from there and see how that's going to impact the long-term future of the Calgary Flames. Well, let's get it on record while you're listening to this show. What do you think Calgary should do? And if the draft has already happened, definitely let us know your initial reaction, because John Easthope from the Red Mile Rundown and myself plan to put out a Saturday edition of Locked On Flames prior to the second round getting started. And we'd love to get your feedback on how you thought the opening round went for the Calgary Flames. Okay. The reality of a show like this is there's no way that I can decide what the Calgary Flames do. And it was even worse sitting in the seat of just a fan, especially because my history with the draft is very, very deep. It just happened to be in football first. Back when I was a seventh grader, probably like a sixth grader, we had chat rooms on Yahoo Chat or probably AOL at that point. And the draft would be going on ESPN, but I would be on the computer and chat rooms doing a little asterisk saying current selection and then putting in the player that was selected. I loved watching the NFL draft from a very young age, and I'm excited to tune into the NHL draft as well. But with that backdrop, I can share with you, even as a fan, hoping that a team would take a specific player. It rarely ever actually materialized the way that I had hoped. And that is likely going to be the case for many of you on Friday with the NHL draft, because in a very perfect year, there's a 1 in 32 chance that you're going to get every pick right, or the player that you ideally want in every round. So with that said, and realizing that that's the truth, I think it's worth exploring what the Flames should do, what they will likely do, and what they won't do, and what that means for the long-term future of the Calgary Flames as well. So let's start with what they should do. And I shared it with the Locked On NHL show when we did our Locked On mock draft, and I still feel the same way right now. Calgary has a unique opportunity to get a player that has a lot of excitement around him, that may be not somebody that originally was thought to be a top 6 player. To some, including some of the mock drafts that are still out there, maybe he's not a top 6 player, and that's Viggo Björck. The ability to look at the what if it comes true of Viggo Björck is worth it for the Calgary Flames to reach on somebody who is in a position to have the largest impact on a franchise. I think the track record of forwards having a bigger impact than defensemen is true. And from a star power standpoint, trying to get players to come play for a franchise, there is a good amount of value that comes from taking a player that gets other hockey players excited, not just the fans, not just season ticket holders, not even just the general manager. Craig Conroy may be really, really excited about a player, and it doesn't translate to be the same amount of excitement to everybody else. With Viggo Björck, there is enough defense on this team. And if the possibility of him being great actually works out, and then Cole Rechny and Colin Potter, one of those two or both, work out to some sort of level, Calgary will be 3 deep at center for the foreseeable future. And if they get to the point where they have 3 centers that are all of a noteworthy category, and they can't even re-sign all of them to a future length of time with the Flames, then they become something that is a valuable trade asset for Calgary to have perennial competitive ability, right? That's what's exciting. I think the idea of the possibility of trading a player down the road if they decide not to stay in Calgary is also something Calgary could get if they choose one of the better defensemen in this draft as well. But if you look at it from a center standpoint, imagine being 3 deep at center and having some pretty good options then to play your 4C as well. It's a really idealistic spot for the Calgary Flames, and it would mean that you've solved a long-term issue that most NHL clubs deal with compared to if they added another deep part to their defenseman pool. Now, Calgary may be setting itself up to have a really solid defense for years to come, a defense that helps keep everything on the scoreboard for the opponent so low that that's how they win games and ultimately a Stanley Cup. But it seems to be that the teams that are hoisting the cup are having players that are dominant in some way, shape, or form on the offensive side. And I think that that's what Calgary would venture to do. That's what at least they should do. And I think it sets Calgary up for a very long stretch of not having to worry about, at least if nothing else, those top 2 center positions. What if they don't do that? That's what they should do. What are they likely to do? I think they're likely to pick the best defenseman available. I think it fits what Craig Conroy has continued to say about this process and what he's advertised that Calgary is going to do. And I think also there's a lot of great options that Calgary can not only get a pick that fits what they're looking for, but there's also a variety of choices that are on the board when Calgary goes to pick. Craig Conroy talked earlier to NHL Flames on X a little bit about going into draft night with a little bit of a solid plan.
Organization.
We're looking for best player. I mean, we always talk about we want to have the best player at each pick, but really with all those picks, we want to make sure whether you're the 6th overall pick or our last pick in the 6th round, we want to make sure the guys are ready. And we want you to be excited about the player we pick at that position because you just never know. I mean, we got Johnny Gaudreau in the 4th round. You look at the players, Dustin Wolf in the 7th. Each pick is important. And we want to make sure, I tell the guys, we want to make sure you want to put that Flaming Sea jersey on them and be proud of that. So, that's kind of the goal. And, they know what we're looking for in the players. I think we're always looking to improve the team. We gave up 2 first-round picks, it's never easy to give up first-round picks, and the number 35 this year. But with that said, we said, okay, we're getting a 22-year-old defenseman that's young, that can grow with this group, and it just seemed like the perfect time to do something. And they don't come up often, so when you get a chance to go after a player like that, you have to, and then...
So that second part of that quote from NHL Flames on X was Craig Conroy talking about the deal that brought Šimon Nemec to Calgary from the New Jersey Devils. That's a former number 2 overall pick. And so another reason that I think Calgary should go with a top 6 selection that is one of the 2 best centers in the entire draft. If Viggo Björck goes to Buffalo, then you maybe have a chance at Caleb Malhotra. If both of those centers are gone, I could completely understand and also would categorize picking the best available defenseman as a should do for Calgary because you're getting an elite player compared to reaching, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But Calgary has an opportunity to add to a defenseman pool that is so deep at this stage, especially from a future ongoing perspective, that the Flames also won't have much of a letdown if you have a player who gets injured for a while. You have a lot of good options. I mean, we're talking Abram Wiebe right now is going to be a player that Calgary is really excited about that would actually be on the outside looking in from the starting 6. And so if Calgary does not get a chance to draft Viggo Björck, or if they decide to go truly best player available, Calgary may view one of those defensemen as a better player at that point at number 6 in the draft. And they ideally would go with a higher upside guy like Viggo Björck, but they may choose the best defenseman because they have so many options available. And that's a place where Calgary will still have a longevity in a position group that they just won't have to worry about for a long amount of time. And that's why it matters the most is Calgary would be building a stable of players that blue line is going to be rich and would set you up with Dustin Wolf at center at goalie for perennially leading the league in defense. And I think that that's an enviable position for any crew. It also makes, again, roster flexibility a little bit better because you decide that you are missing a component down the road. Maybe you have someone deep in that defenseman room that you can move to make a team give you something that's more of an asset on the offensive side. What they won't do, I don't see this team reaching for a player that is projected to be lower on the list. A name like Tynan Lawrence comes to mind. If there's a scenario where Viggo Björck, Caleb Malhotra both get drafted ahead of Calgary, and you have all those defensemen sitting, but you just really want a center, I could see Calgary potentially reaching. I guess I can't see it. I could imagine that Calgary might make a choice where they reach for somebody that's more of that position of need, but nothing about what we've heard Craig Conroy say at this point would make that happen. And I think that as we project what this means for the Flames and why it matters, is if Calgary were to pick Tynan Lawrence or even trade down to try to get an additional pick down the road or down the first round draft board, I think Calgary is still bypassing players that have huge upsides that you'd rather have one potential star on your roster as opposed to a couple of really good players who, again, could wind up being stars, but the chances of that you would imagine is lower when you're picking somebody who's ranked, 11th in the draft class as opposed to someone who's in the top 6. So that's what I think Calgary will do, what they should do, and then certainly what they won't do. All of that certainly might be answered by the time that you listen to this. So if Calgary is already selected, I invite you to let us know in your YouTube comments, what did you think of the first round of the draft? And what are you hoping for on day 2? We'll bring some of that up on the Saturday special edition of Locked On Flames. Toughest part of Friday might be that time between number 6 and number 30, especially if you are hoping the Flames move up. We'll discuss that next on this episode of Locked On Flames. If you have a sweet tooth like I do, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all the sugar. And that's why Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shot brings a nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots treat your taste buds to an explosion of fruity flavor, the tasty caffeine kick. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy a sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. It's a zero sugar treat. It's sweet tooth approved, and it is super convenient. It's a small portable shot that you can take with you, have a little pick-me-up whenever needed. It is a go-to when you want something sweet without going overboard. Get candy-flavored chaos with Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots, available at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. There are more live events than ever that are worth seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprising fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. And that's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make ticket buying simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events you want to without that usual hassle. Honestly, I want to know what my view will look like before I get in the stadium. And that is one of the best parts about Game Time. It helps you know exactly what your view will look like. And there's no surprise fees because you're getting the price up front. 2 things that you can avoid ahead of time: buying your tickets with a ton of confidence with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Toughest part of the draft might be that space between 6 and 30 on Friday night. We'll talk more about that, especially if you're thinking that you want the Flames to move up. First, want to invite you to join our Everydayer Club. We built this with you in mind at lockedonflames.supercast.com. Go to it right now because you get a 7-day free trial. So you might as well sign up and see what it's all about and how much better your life might be by getting our show ad-free on your favorite podcast app. That's one of the perks of the Everydayer Club. Costs just $5 a month if you decide to keep it. And you get access to our members-only Discord, which is a great place to be, especially on draft night. Click on the link in the show notes or go to lockedonflames.supercast.com to learn more. Calgary has the 30th pick in the opening round. They have a good amount of second-round ammo as well. And what does that mean? Calgary is likely going to be in a position where they can move up. If you want the Flames to trade up, this is going to be probably the toughest part on Friday night. And so much like we did in our opening segment, not only are we going to explore if Calgary should trade up, but what would it mean if they decided to trade up? First and foremost, you have a couple of target trade partners that are up there because you have certain teams that have either a reason to trade down or there's a good amount of inventory available to them that maybe they want to defer some of that into next year. Does Calgary love an Alexander Command or a Wyatt Cullen so much more than some other options that are going to fall to them at 30 that they would be willing to package their next year's pick and number 30 this year to get somebody ahead of time? That doesn't seem to be the case. The consensus for the 2027 class is that is a forward-rich draft as well. Calgary is likely not going to be very good in the final year at the Saddle Dome. So I don't see Calgary getting rid of any of their remaining first-round picks because all of them are their own picks now that they made the deal for Šimon Nemec earlier in the week. So rule that out. I don't imagine that's going to be the case. Instead, what I can see Calgary doing is packaging some of their second-round inventory, maybe even dipping into a 27 or 28 second-round pick, especially now that Calgary's locked into the Vegas Golden Knights pick in 28 as a second-rounder, and using that to try to move forward 5, maybe even 10 spots to get back into the top 20 and go after somebody, especially if they had fallen. Imagine if Alexander Command falls down and Calgary really likes him. Maybe they want to make sure that they get one of the rucks that they're really high on. Maybe it's a Liam Ruck who seems to be somebody that Calgary might pick. Maybe there's a match ahead of them that makes a lot of sense as a destination for a Blake Coleman. Or maybe Connor Zary actually does get moved. Calgary doesn't really have anybody on this list other than Zane Parekh, who would be untouchable in a scenario where they're getting a chance to pick a top 15 player, even if they were trying to go that high. Bottom line, Calgary did this earlier in the week with Šimon Nemec, where they said, hey, there's a number 2 overall pick talent that we have a chance to acquire now by getting rid of 2 late first-round picks. Those picks were not going to be available to Calgary in the top 10 had they kept on to him anyway. So it's not the same kind of inventory that Calgary had with their existing number 6 pick and what they likely might have in upcoming drafts. And so if that's the case, I would rather Calgary have somebody that they feel really good about, that they had a chance to select because they moved up and had a little bit of inventory that's gone, because the Flames do not have a quantity problem. They have an opportunity to add to the quality of the room. And I think that would matter more than anything for the Calgary Flames. So is there anybody untouchable on this list? Probably not. Even if there's a deal that would make sense to send Matt Coronado somewhere where his stock's as high as any Flame, since he led the team in points last season, I could see that be the case for Calgary to be able to make that kind of move. The Flames don't have to be impatient, unlike someone like me who wants them to be, because it seems like Flames fans are comfortable, buckled in, and ready for this moment where they have to suffer through some additional years of a rebuild for the potential upside of what comes on the other side of that. The Flames fan base has just been so vocal about how frustrating it has been to be a team that since the 2004 Western Conference Championship year has only made it to the second round once. And so if that's the case, or at least has not gotten past the second round, if that's the case, the Flames don't necessarily have to make a big splash move to get in the top 15. Is there a player that fits what Calgary would want in the top 15? That's an interesting thing, because if you just look at any of the mock drafts, or, I've been using Tankathon in terms of having their mock draft board open for most of the shows that I do with you on Locked On Flames, because that was where the sim lottery, the lottery simulator was. They have Viggo Björck, Tynan Lawrence as the centers on the board. And you drop down, it's Alexander Command and Oliver Savanto down at 15, 16, who are projected to go back-to-back to the St. Louis Blues. After that, there's not really another forward on the list until number 5, number 6, number 25, number 26. And we talked about a couple of those players in that realm, whether it was with Locked On NHL Prospects or we brought up a couple of names on our own. And that's where Calgary could move up just a couple of spots with minimal draft capital burned. But you have to see if there's a team that's interested in someone like a Blake Coleman. That kind of player is going to a team that's probably going to contend sooner than later. So does that entice something like Washington to move out of 18? Does it entice the Sabres, who have number 20 on the board? Is there someone like Boston or Ottawa who would want to bring him in and trade one of those high upper 20 picks? That's something that I think would make a lot of sense for the Calgary Flames. And again, why it matters is you have players that you need to open up roster spots for anyway. If it makes sense, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, I think Calgary will find a really good player that they really like at number 30 and be just fine with that and really hone in on the fact that they're going to get a pretty good amount of quality with all the picks that they have in the top 60 of the draft. On Fridays, we look at what we learned this week in Flames hockey. We'll recap the week that was, and we'll get you set for Saturday's post-first round draft show, a special episode of Locked On Flames. It's coming up next. ED is way more common than most guys think, and millions of men deal with it at some point. HIMS offers a simple, convenient way to take care of your health by connecting you with licensed healthcare providers online and giving you access to personalized treatment options from the comfort of home. No awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process designed to make getting care easier. Taking care of yourself should not feel complicated, and HIMS makes the process private and easy to navigate. It's healthcare built around your schedule and your comfort. You look at healthcare, it can be really frustrating sometimes with all of the stuff that you have to do, and that can make the experience feel a little bit more daunting. When something's already uncomfortable to talk about, the last thing you want is a process that's even more complicated. Having the ability to start online from home makes taking the first step feel much more manageable. To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/lockedonnhl. That's hims.com/lockedonnhl for your free online visit. hims.com/lockedonnhl. Prescription required. See website for details and important safety information. Sildenafil is the generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of Viatris Specialty LLC. HIMS is not affiliated with or endorsed by Viatris. The week that was in Calgary Flames hockey, and happy NHL draft day to you all. Thanks for tuning into the Friday episode of Locked On Flames. Saturday, we'll try to get you the episode posted before 11 a.m. Mountain Time. It's the time that sticks out in my mind for the second round of the NHL draft, to make sure that you have that. John Easthope from the Red Mile Rundown podcast will join me, and they had a special earlier in the week draft preview after all the trades that happened. You can find that on their channel, the Red Mile Rundown on YouTube. All right, what we learned this week in Calgary Flames hockey. Flames seem to be embracing a little bit more of an aggressive rebuild. They make the deal for Šimon Nemec and bring him over from the New Jersey Devils. Now, what will they do to try to target more prospects, especially seeing if there's a way to get back into the top of the draft? Also, there was talk earlier on Friday, maybe Calgary will have made a move to trade with Buffalo and get up to number 4. Of course, you may be listening to this after the NHL draft as it was, so we'll see more about that on Saturday. But you can tell that Craig Conroy has a long-term, high-upside focus on this draft, and it'll be interesting to see how long-lasting this existing NHL draft will be for the Calgary Flames, especially because that seemed to be what Craig Conroy said. This is kind of putting things in motion for the future of the franchise. The Flames also will have to try to see how resignable people are. Is there a changing landscape? We talked about it earlier on the week that the Brady Tkachuk trade may have symbolized another shift in the amount of American players who may not try to get a second contract in Canada. If that's the case, is that a red flag for a team that plays in Alberta? The pool of United States players is getting bigger as the youth movement for Canadian hockey actually gets smaller. That was an interesting thing that I learned this week. It seems like with Calgary at least getting a new building, they'll have the newest building in Canada for the foreseeable future. I think that'll help Calgary. And also it seems like Craig Conroy and the team is building an atmosphere that people will want to come play for Calgary and stay there, especially if they can find a way to move past the second round in the not so distant future. And then, of course, how strong this defense is going to be. If Dustin Wolf is as good as Calgary hopes he's going to be, the moves for Šimon Nemec just changes how solid Calgary's defense will be with Hunter Brustevich, Zane Parekh, so many young players, Yan Kuznetsov. I love how I can completely forget about Yan so often just because he was so solid, so dependable since he got the nod to be part of the top two pairings for the Flames. And he's so young still that Calgary has just so much value already that a player like Abram Wiebe, who was a big deal coming over to the Flames, ultimately may not be a player that's up on the big roster every single year. So the future is bright for the defense. And I think this might be a situation where if Calgary does decide to go defense in the draft on Friday night, you might just be adding and making the rich be richer and giving you options and flexibility down the road, especially if somebody doesn't pan out. Maybe that's a Zane Parekh, right? That's a possibility, and Calgary would have a little bit of insurance if that was the case. We are so excited to talk to you on Saturday because we'll know who the Flames drafted in the opening round, maybe with even all two picks still intact. Don't imagine them trading out of the first round. We'll see what happens, though. And, of course, we want to hear from you in our YouTube comments. Let me know what you thought of the Flames' first-round draft because you're likely hearing this after the draft has occurred. Please subscribe to the podcast. We always appreciate everyone doing that on their favorite podcast app, as well as subscribing on YouTube. Our quest for 1,000 subscribers continues. And please join our Everydayer Club, especially if you never miss an episode, because there's no risk in clicking on the link at lockedonflames.supercast.com. There's a built-in 7-day free trial, and you can keep it for $5 a month. It's going to allow you to listen to the show ad-free on your favorite podcast app, plus get access to a members-only Discord server. $5 a month you'll likely not miss, and you're going to save some time listening to the show each and every week. For those of you on video, please stick around. We'll send you over the first ever 24/7 Locked On Network YouTube channel. For those of you on audio, please make your second listen NHL Game Night with Locked On NHL. Happy draft day. Look forward to talking to you more on a future episode of Locked On Flames. I'm Ryan G. Thanks for having fun with us.